Dina Babushkina, welcome to the Ethics of Socially Disruptive Technologies podcast. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. I'm very excited to be speaking to you.
Hi, Cindy. Thank you so much. The same here. I'm very excited to have this chat with you, and thanks for volunteering to interview me.
Yeah, sure. So Dina, your primary research interest is in philosophy of artificial intelligence and smart robotics, and you've published a few papers on the topic. And one of your recent papers is entitled Disruption, Technology, and the Question of Artificial Identity.
Yes, Cindy, that's right. And I co-authored it with Athanasios Potsis last year.
Yeah, and I really enjoyed reading the paper. And since the ESDiT project itself conducts research on different kinds of technological disruption, I really thought that speaking about this paper would, for obvious reasons, be quite relevant to the topic itself and our podcast series. And as I said, it was a super interesting paper and I enjoyed reading it a lot. But I think before kind of delving into the nitty-gritty of the arguments that you make, I thought it might be a good idea to just first discuss what you mean by the term disruption itself that you used throughout the paper.
Yes, thanks, Sydney. I'm glad that you found the paper interesting. I agree. So maybe that's really a good intro into the discussion. So disruption. Well, we suggested a sort of working definition of disruption, and it goes something like this. So for some phenomena A to be considered disruptive for another phenomena B, A's effects on B, direct or indirect, must be such that B is not able to continue to exist or transition smoothly to another state, given the rules governing B's nature. So you see, our goal was to capture sort of a certain aspect of disruptive effects of modern technology, which we felt are still kind of not sufficiently discussed in research literature, and to a great extent, these aspects are ignored by people developing, managing, and implementing such technologies in society. So we wanted to focus attention on the way modern technology affects one's personhood, and to conceptualize the new types of vulnerabilities that personhood experiences due to the interaction with these technologies. So this is to say that we did not have a goal to develop sort of full-fledged account of technological disruption that would fit all domains, say economic or political or whatever, but we chose to focus on the aspects that are relevant to the human condition.
Nice, and I really think that's a great way to conceptualize and think about it, and it definitely helped with my understanding of the term disruption itself and how you can apply it to different contexts. So yeah, really cool. So now another term that is important to define in the context of the paper is anthropomorphization, which is quite a difficult word to say.
Yes.
It takes a lot of practice for me. But what is anthropomorphization and what role does it play in human technology interaction?
Yeah, I think you managed it beautiful. I mean, I always struggle with that as well. But anthropomorphization comes from two Greek words. So anthropos, which is human, and morphe, which means form, right? So in a nutshell, the term refers to the tendency of people to attribute to an animate object features which are typically human or broadly animalistic, right? So these features may include conscious or unconscious beliefs, as well as emotional reactions, or even perhaps ability to act in a certain way. So there are two aspects to this tendency. So one element is cognitive, and it's a belief that an object or an artifact has certain human or animal-like abilities and features. And the other element is behavioral. And by this, I mean acting, ability to act or acting upon such a belief. That is to say, an inclination to guide one's actions towards this inanimate object by the belief that it has such human on human-like features. Cindy, you asked me about the role this tendency plays in human technology interaction. That's a very interesting question, very broad question, but it's also, like, from my perspective, a descriptive questions, and it is sort of hard to find a snappy answer which you can express in a few words, but I'll try at least you can approach it. So on the one hand, there is a strong tendency by those who develop and market such technologies as computer technology, AI, and robotics to give their products features that make them more human-like, right? So the logic here is often, and I don't see always, but often goes something like this. It's easier for people to relate to devices that imitate human properties, like, so that is to say that people tend to anthropomorphize devices. And therefore, we should make devices that are more human-like. So this is done to boost the readiness of the consumers to buy and use the product. Like, on the other hand, again, from the descriptive point of view, it is true that many people do not, that many people do tend to interpret the changes in the states of, say, a robot in terms of beliefs, desires, and intentions. So this tendency to think of inanimate objects as if they were animate and treat them as such is by itself nothing new in human history, right? It had taken various forms in the past, and the object itself does not necessarily need to have any resemblance to the animalistic features it is being ascribed, right? So the fact that this happens in the case of modern technologies, which in many cases are designed with the goal of imitating or substituting certain human or animal features, is by itself not surprising. But what I think is more interesting for the ethics of human technology interaction is to ask, should we, and to what extent we should allow this tendency to be exploited by the industry? Can it be harmful? If we allow it, then under what conditions? So, but this is, of course, now a normative question sort of takes us, further.
Yeah, of course. And I think, I really appreciate the distinction that you made between the descriptive side of anthropomorphization and the normative side as well. And I definitely think that this normative aspect is very interesting, ethically interesting, and really important to engage with as well. And now you discuss some risks that are associated with anthropomorphization, such as the degradation of relationships between persons, frustration of rationally justified expectations and subsequent psychological stress, and the objectification of persons. However, you put forward that we need to look beyond anthropomorphization, and could you tell us why this is the case?
Yeah, certainly. So a short answer would be, this is so that we do not lose the sight of other problems, which could be perhaps even more important, so that we do not overlook new challenges and new phenomena. So you see, our point in the paper is that anthropomorphization is not sort of unique to technology, right? So in a sense, it is a tendency that people anyway have. And I do not say that we should not study this or react to it. I'm just saying that over-focusing on this issue in turn overshadows other things. So for example, such technologies as AI and data mining are quite unique among other technologies, and they create dramatically new types of vulnerabilities, which we have never experienced before, right? So even if we look at more mundane computer technologies, we will see that the degree of our reliance on them for performance of many cognitive tasks is already so high that this on its own creates serious risks. So, and the earlier we detect this, the earlier we will be able to tackle these new challenges, and this will help to reduce and prevent harm to the users.
Yeah, and I really think that's an important observation, and is obviously important to tackle these new challenges as early on as possible, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so thanks. And then you go on to discuss the hybridization of personhood. And I enjoyed this aspect of the paper as well, which is, you say, one of the emerging HTI, human technology interaction processes, that the overconcentration on anthropomorphization drives attention away from. So what do you mean by the hybridization of personhood, and how does it occur? And then, sorry, a third sub-question, could you then give an example of hybridized personhood?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, that's a very exciting concept, isn't it? Hybrid personality or hybrid personhood. So the way we defined it in the paper, hybridization of personhood is a sort of situation where the capacities and properties that are commonly thought as determinants of personhood become merged with technology in one way or another, right? So it's like very general. And there are different ways this can happen. One may choose to do this consciously, say you want to enhance some of your cognitive capacities, or, and this is the case we chose to focus on, it may happen as a natural consequence of your interaction with a device, such as a laptop or a mobile phone. So if you think about it, throughout the history of like your interaction with such technology, you know, as your laptop or maybe a robot, one sort or another that you have experienced in the past, you have invested a part of your own personality into it. So by fine-tuning the settings, training the algorithm with your own data, interconnecting various applications and services due to your specific needs and preferences, feeding information about events in your personal life to various systems, and making all that influence, structure, assist, and often regulate various aspects of your life, work, and interaction with others. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what we think is happening. So it is a question of a degree of intimacy of pairing between you and the device, as well as a degree of reliance of that device for the solution of certain cognitive tasks where the hybridization of personhood lies. So you ask me what example. That's of course always tricky, but I have like an easy way out. Well, I think that my laptop is my cognitive extender, right? So to a certain extent, me and my laptop form a hybrid person. I'll give you a couple of examples of cognitive substitution in this case. So I would say that by now my Mac calendar is nearly fully performing the cognitive functions necessary for planning of my day, right? And actually the latest update that I experienced in the system led to the fact that I couldn't integrate all my separate accounts into the Mac calendar. So basically now I'm unable to do any sort of casual booking, say for the dentist appointment. If I am there at the reception, I have to have my computer, which has my work schedule, and my home device, right, which has all other accounts integrated. So that's kind of quite disruptive to the way I can smoothly plan my activities. The second example would be text writing. So I do the thinking, of course, right, and analysis and all that stuff, but the actual process of writing the paper for me can be done only in the Microsoft Word. So using any other means will significantly reduce my productivity and efficiency, at least until the time I master it and tune it to my specific needs so that I can accommodate the flow, of my work.
Nice. And I think as much as you said it's tricky to find an example, I think these are really great examples. And I think especially with the laptop, I think everyone can really relate to that. So it just, we really relate to this kind of research, which is great. It's really important. But now that we have an understanding of what hybridized personhood is, why is it so important to focus our attention to this hybridized personhood?
Mm-hmm. There are several reasons, I would say. So, but I think the most important one is the fact that when we look at our relationship with certain technologies as a type of hybridization, this allows us to see the depth of codependency of the human and the artificial agents in the process of the formation of their identities. This in turn allows us to evaluate the range of new vulnerabilities that this codependency brings with it.
And then just following from this, then how does this notion of hybridized personhood then change how we usually understand the relation between humans and technology then?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Cindy. I would say it shows that we need to pay more serious attention to the dependency of the user on their devices, right? So the relationship is often much more intimate than we normally think. On the one hand, we need to rethink the set of vulnerabilities and possible harm from this kind of technology that we interact with. On the other hand, it must become apparent, I think, that when there is a high degree of dependency, the liberty to interfere with the technology, and I mean the things that others can do to your device, right, becomes or rather should become considerably limited by the vulnerability of the codependent human agent. So that's a parameter that has to be taken into consideration quite seriously when any changes with the device are being planned.
Yeah, of course, and I definitely agree, and I think that it's something very important that we should just pay attention to and think about. And you then later in the paper, you go on to discuss the notion of artificial identity. So could you then explain what artificial identity is and how it relates to your previous discussion about hybridized personhood, just so the listeners can kind of bring this all together? And then again, a sub question, can you give some examples of artificial identity?
Yes, absolutely. So what we offer in our paper can be called a dependent account of artificial identity. In a sense, we say that it only makes sense to talk about an identity of a device in connection to vulnerabilities of the person with whom it's paired, right? The same idea in different words can be expressed this way. So artificial identity becomes important when the actions that alter or destroy the device constitute for its user a non-trivial change or disruption in his or her life, right? So artificial identity is a matter of extension of its user's personality and the synthesis with the user's psychological states, right? So from this perspective, my laptop has acquired an artificial identity due to my pairing with it. Your laptop, for example, cannot substitute the unique functionality of my laptop that it acquired due to fine-tuning to my cognitive needs, right? So certain types of radical updates on my laptop will disrupt my workflow and can cause me substantial distress. But for example, some of the phones I had in the past did not extend my personality to that degree, and they could be easily replaced without any noticeable disruption to my life. So these devices or these phones did not acquire any identity, if you look on it from our perspective. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, it does. I think that distinction is really clear. And as you were answering it, I just kept obviously relating it to my own experiences, which I think, most listeners will be doing. And I went through a patch where my usual work laptop just broke down, and I had to borrow someone's laptop for a few weeks, and that week was just an absolute mess. And yeah, so I relate to that, and I'm sure a lot of people do. So now, given this discussion about artificial identity, you then raise the question of whether we could just conceptualize artificial identity analogously with personal identity, but you negate this. And so could you tell us why you negate it?
Yeah, that's the tricky one. The reason is that the type of phenomena we are aiming to describe in our paper simply does not fit the concept of personal identity. So Athanasius explained this, I think, in a very interesting way. He called this asymmetry and asynchronicity of personal and artificial identities. So I think this is a rather sort of a compact way to summarize a rather long list of characteristics that pull apart that what would constitute uniqueness and sameness of a piece of technology, say, right, such as laptop or a smartphone, and its user, on the other hand. So another reason for our choice is something that I called a derivative right to persist. So the idea here is that a person has a right to be not mutilated or altered, physically or psychologically. So this happens sort of in a natural way. It's a kind of natural right of a person as a moral patient. So we have it simply in virtue of being unique individuals that we are. Now, objects such as electronic devices do not have the same non-derivative right to persist. It still may be wrong for me to break your phone, but that is not because of its unique identity. It's because it is your property. But now, if you think of the default assumptions in the sort of updates practices, there is complete disregard to the personalized parameters. However, this hinder and alter the process of interaction with the device, the ease of workflow and overall performance, right?
Yeah, and I really, really like this discussion. And so now that we have an understanding of artificial identity, then now getting to the nitty-gritty ethical issues, what are the ethical implications that then arise with this phenomenon?
That's the most sort of tasty part, right? So I think we only just now start understanding the magnitude of this implication. So I don't think we can, by no means give the entire picture at this point. But in our paper, what we thought with Athanasius, the logic goes something like this. So because the degree of pairing between the artificial and the human agent, the vulnerabilities of the device create vulnerabilities for the user. So there is a need to address these new types of vulnerabilities and protect users from the possible harm. Minimizing the adverse effects on the user is a part of responsible design and engineering. So how can this be achieved? We suggest that this can be achieved by protecting the hybrid identity, which in turn requires protecting the artificial identity from intrusive alterations. So in other words, the fact that human agent is susceptible to the negative effects of certain types of changes in the artificial agent tells us about their dependency in vulnerability. And it is this mutual vulnerability that grants the artificial agent its unique derivative now, right to persist, as we call it in our paper. So this means that the right not to be altered or destroyed unless the conditions for a smooth transition to another state can be provided to the hybrid agent. This, for example, calls for a revision of existing practices of software life cycles, right? Such as updates, their schedule, the extent of the alterations it does to the system of the device, the extra actions they require on behalf of the user to maintain the pairing with the device on the level that provides smooth functioning on the hybrid cognitive functions, right? So more broadly, we need to continue investigating the vulnerabilities of the hybrid agents and the factors that may threaten their identity. And it is crucial for raising awareness about the unique psychosynthesis, that's another difficult Greek word, with artificial agents we live with, and for better understanding what normative constraints as well as freedoms are needed. That's in a nutshell.
Nice. It's a great nutshell. Thank you. Right. So thank you so much, Dina, for a really fascinating discussion. And if listeners would like to read this article in more detail, where can they access it?
Yes. So the article has been published in the journal called AI and Ethics. It's available in open access, and it should be also accessible from personal pages of myself or Athanasius on the University of Twente website.
Great. And could you just maybe then give listeners some insight into other research questions you are exploring at the moment so we can look out for it?
Thanks, Cindy. So I think that's one of the most difficult ones, probably, because I always have so many interests. Definitely, we continue working on the same topic of, disruption and hybrid identity. We also have just published another paper with Athanasios, and it is on epistema ethical constraints on the process of hybrid decision-making. It is published in Ethics and Information Technology, also open access. So it's something that we also keep on looking into. Another project I'm working on is like solo project is on ethical implications of the simulation game. I'm really fascinated with limitations of acceptability of the simulation. And another one ongoing is with Giano Audin. We are writing a paper on self-formation and desire in combination or sort of under influence of data mining technologies. So it's more on identity issues.
So lots going on, which is really great. And I'm sure listeners will be interested in looking out for your upcoming publications. So thank you, Dina. And I'm just really looking forward to myself keeping an eye out for more of your publications. And thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Cindy. Very, very enjoyable discussion today. And indeed, I myself looking forward to, new episodes. Maybe something new comes up.